Hi everyone, we are in the second live session for today. We wanted to cut in bits and pieces so that we can listen to the short videos rather than the 2 hour long video. And two wonderful ladies with us from around the world, but India in Hong Kong, India in New Jersey. So we have Priya from Hong Kong on the session with us, and then we have Anuprita. So first we will give it over to Priya so she can describe what is she going to talk about and what does she do so that we can get to know her. And then we will give it over to Anuprita and she's going to talk about her offensive and defensive part of security, and she'll actually share what she does in her day-to-day life in security, because we all live and breathe security. And now when we are inside, so we're going to go live and we're going to chit chat all digitally. So Priya, over to you.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Vanda and Asta for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this talk. And just to start the topic, let me just give me a background about myself. I've been working in information security from over 5 years. I've got experience in data privacy, third-party risk management, and I've worked majorly on the IT governance part. And during my career time, I have also got an opportunity to work on the shadow IT. And that was one of the interesting projects which I can say I have worked on. And I really wanted to share some of my insights which I've learned during my work. So let me just present my screen. So let's talk about what is shadow IT. So I would not give a brief introduction what is shadow IT is right now. Let's take a step back and talk about what are the current practices in IT system takes care. So you can say right now they have got so many nice different kind of controls which says like they restrict the administrative access, so that, and they also only install the approved applications, and then they do the regular patching. And there are multiple things which can be done only for the applications or the software which have been known by the IT systems, by the IT teams. But what about if they don't have an idea about uh, the software which have been installed somewhere out of the coverage of the IT teams? So that is what is going as a shadow IT. So the very high level definition what is given by the Gartner is that any software services which is not under the ownership of the IT, or they don't have a control on it, this is known as shadow IT. It can be any of the three things. It can be a hardware, it can be an off-the-shelf package software, or it can be a cloud services. But as of now, the most important and most biggest category right now is the SaaS applications. And the reason why we are talking about this is that because most of the time what happens is that we end up using a cloud application which we are not aware what is happening on it, and we just install it locally, or we try to update all the details which we want to do it online, and then we are not aware what exactly is the impact. But let's talk about how does it actually begin. So I'll just give a basic example. Even if you have a company approved set of lists, which is given by the IT, they say that, let me try to use it. But then if there is someone else who's suggesting you to use some other good application, which they think is much better, but they are not aware whether it is it's definitely an unapproved application. But then if it is used, how is it going to impact you? So then the next person is like, you can try this. And then when they try it, they just install the app. They can use that application. They give all the important sensitive files there. It can be anything which can impact the company directly, because they might be customers data, they might be the financial data, etc. But then once you use it, then we come to a conclusion that, this is really cool, but then is it secure? But actually there is no one who can actually see this, because they are not thinking in the perspective of security. They're thinking more in the perspective of let my work be done. So what can be the impacts of shadow IT? So it can be all kind of impacts. Like you are you're just putting the sensitive files on the cloud, and if there's any data breach, it is impacting you in the, it is a regulatory impact, there is a legal impact, there's a financial impact, there's a reputation impact. And how is it happening? Actually, it's happening because when you have these attacks, successful attack, which have been predicted by Gartner, that one third of the successful attack will be because of the data located to the shadow IT. It can be gets into the regulatory impact, which is one of the things which we have is GDPR. And if there are customer data involved in it, and you are not aware that it has been breached, and if you get to know it is breached from your company, and the it is impacting your company altogether, then you have to pay the penalties. So it is going in all different direction because we are not able to monitor these kind of applications. So let's talk about, even if there are so many impacts of it, there are so negative parts of it, there's so many things happening around, but why do people actually use it? There might be something new, something good, right? The Based on our experience, when I had discussed with the teams around my the clients, I came to this conclusion. Even around the world, when I've discussed with the people, it was the same thing, that it's because the approved set of software which is given by the company might not be good enough, which is giving the good functionalities which is actually required by the any individual. Also, it can be more complicated. It might not be it won't be giving you all kind of features which they want. But at the same time, the employee might not be aware of it, that what is the security risk, because he's just doing what he's doing because he is just aware that there might be a multiple impacts on his one action. And even if we have employee awareness in place, or also you have a approved software cycle altogether to follow the approval process, there might be a chance that the approved software cycle will not be that straightforward. It might take more time than it was expected. So that's the reason that people are tending to move towards the shadow IT applications, because they are not so much happy with the current applications, which they are the set of application given by the IT system. And also they also think that the process which has been provided by the companies, if they have one, it might not be that good enough to get the approval done in one go. So it is of course a faster approach to go for the other option. So this is one of the reason these are the reason why the people are using shadow IT. So what are this shadow IT exactly? We can just give a very rough example, like, the sales team giving sharing his customer personal data on his personal Google Drive, or he can use the same on the phone just to make sure that he can make some calls when he's traveling somewhere. And there is nowhere where the IT is aware that there are some companies customers data lying on his personal drive. I've also seen there have been, multiple, there are lots of tools right now for the screen sharing, and the companies are not aware of it. They cannot just keep a track of it because there might be a restriction on the installing of application locally. But what about the SaaS? Also, the most common and the best examples which I have majorly seen is that we also have the survey monkey kind of tools, which are used on the SaaS. They just subscribe to it, and also they have multiple survey around the world, and they just keep the data over there, and the IT is still not aware of it, and they cannot manage it. So these are the one specific examples. Let's talk about the statistics. So as per the next web, what they have understood, that the overall report for the shadow IT is turning to be like, the most highest used the risk area, or the high risk software places called collaboration. So the collaboration can be the place where we share the data, or we can store the data. So these are the one category which is highly used. And then as per their survey, they understood that there are 67% of the users which have introduced their own team collaboration within the organization. And also there are 82% who actually push back to the IT team and management when they are trying to, tell them to use the only the approved collaboration tool. So the whole point is that even if you have the email DLP in place, you have other different rules in place, but if you are not able to restrict these things, you're still putting yourself at risk of sharing the data by the employee who just want to get the work done. And you are still not aware of it until you have something to manage for it. And at the end there are 79% they have identified when the employees have introduced or used a new technology without IT approval and is risking the security of in the company and data. Then we talk about the statistic, but what about the spending? So there are around so every year when there is a IT budget coming up, they might be having a good set of amount which they have set for the IT budget for spending on the IT approved applications. But what about the SaaS applications which the employees is using with their corporate cards? As per the survey by Gartner, again, we noted that there are 30 to 40% of the IT spending on the large enterprise using it can be on the company's corporate cards or different channel which they do it. But then at the same time, they are again spending more than expected. What is happening? Because even if they have a good set of things in place, but if they are not catering the requirement of the employees, it is also leading them to invest more. So let's talk about what can be the pros of the shadow IT, because if the employees are trying to invest so much on the applications and at the same time they think that the faster approach can be the shadow IT related application, but there definitely it might be some positive sides of the shadow IT. So rather than restricting everything on the point of time that the company should also consider thinking what can be the pros. So the pros can be the efficient work. So if there are certain set of approved applications which are not catering the requirement, they definitely come up with some other backup softwares which is helping them to work efficiently, and at the end of the day the work is getting done with more efforts. So and also the teams the also the employees have a good freedom to explore around, so they are more creative comparatively. And at the end of the day you can think as an organization that it's a better future investment. And reason why we say it's a better future investment, it's because if you have a efficient employee with a creative idea, you can always use those particular applications, those particular services as a approved application going ahead, and it can help you to make your employees and as well as the productivity improved. But at the same time there are certain cons. So the con side is that, as we spoke before, that as we speak, that the applications are unmonitored and unmanaged. So basically, if there is any risk of the data loss or any attack, the IT team is still not aware of it. They cannot do the patching on it. They cannot do the restriction on the access. So there is very very minimal chance that you are aware that these applications, these data have been handled in a proper way. Also there can be a chance that the employee who has been using any services which he might have kept the good data on it, financial data on it, or the customer data on it, he left the job and he's not working anymore, but then that particular file is like not being opened by anyone because you have no visibility on it. And at the same time there are the issues like the interoperability and continuity issues, because there is no resilience plan on those particular applications. So there might be a chance one day that if you have done hundreds of tons of work on it, but if the if there is any issue at the back end, the IT team or any team cannot help an employee to recover those particular data. So now let's talk about how can we manage the shadow IT related applications, because since till now we were talking about what are the pros, what are the cons, how it is impacting, but have we ever thought that how can we manage those particular shadow IT related applications? The most common ways are documenting the policies, and they have the shadow IT related tools which are in place. We educate the employees, and more we'll be talking ahead. So the first thing I would like to talk about is how do we come up with the governance model for the shadow IT? So we, as an organization or a management or a IT team, need to understand that, if there is no policy or procedure in place, we may not enforce our own employees to follow the rules because there are no controls on place. So at the end of the day, we have to come to a strategy to ensure that we are very clear with the IT responsibilities. We understand that what can be the IT responsibilities, like catering the requirement of the employees. And we also talk about the employee responsibilities, because we should help them to understand that if they use any application related to shadow IT where they're putting the any sensitive data, so it might be impacting them. So, and then if they know about these things, they can still think twice before doing the next steps. And we come up with the procedures which gives you the faster approval plan, because if there is a requirement which has to be done in a day or two, but the employee wants to get into a position that comes into the position that whether I should go for the approved application, which takes like 2 or 3 days or more than that to get the approval, or I go for the shortcut or the faster approach, which is the unsanctioned application or unapproved application. So that's way, if we come up with the faster approval process, it is also better for them. At the same time, we should also have penalties and the violation related uh, controls in place, because if we don't have anything which talks about the penalties and violation in the policy, they are not the employees may not take it very seriously, and they should also understand the disciplinary actions, all the other actions which can be taken if they are not following this requirement. The other part is that as per the CSO quick poll, they also, even they did this poll, they understood that the written policies are the most common way in the organization to govern the use of external cloud. So 42%, it was a good chance that we are able to govern based on the policies and procedure, even if you have other things in place, but the policy and procedure plays the major role. The other parts, like educating the employees that what will be the consequences of shadow IT, and also if we tell them that what can be the faster approach, and what how can we understand, how can we cater the requirement of the employees, and deliver to them in a way that they are more open with the IT team and the management rather than depending on any third party tools. And there are also the requirement that the IT team, or there are any other dedicated team which is proactively understanding the trends of the market. Like if they want to understand that there are certain new tools which is catering much better requirement of the of the in the market, which they can help the teams, their internal teams, and they can just use those tools and then help them to make them as a sanctioned or approved application. And the next is using shadow IT discovery tool. So this is also one of the thing which is very interesting to do, because you have a tool like a CASB tool, that cloud access security broker tool, which helps you to understand the in and outward traffic. And this was one of the case when we have identified, we have done in one of the client place as well. And what happens is that you can, when you monitor the traffic, you can come up with a strategy to identify the application in the sanctioned and unsanctioned way, or provisional sanction way or authorized way. So the overall process was like that, first we need to discover what are the shadow IT application based on the traffic. And once you understand the traffic, you can understand the trend, understand the risky application. Like if you understand that the remote sharing applications are the most risky one, so why not we just block the high category one? And you also use the compliance check because you understand that based on the type of application being used, you can also check on the type of impact it's going to have because of its risk category. So you divide them into the different risk category, high, medium, and low as per the requirement. You can block the very high risky one, and you can use the medium and low one as to cater the requirement of the employees. And you can also try to understand the usage, because if there are multiple usage for the same application, you can just add them as the approved one rather than just blocking them. And then you can do the continuous monitoring on the usage of it. So these are the overall practices which are being followed to manage the shadow IT applications. And the key takeaways of this session would be that almost every organization is facing the challenge of the shadow IT. But I would say, as an employee, we should think, before entering, what sensitive data we are entering to any application or the unsanctioned application. And as a cybersecurity specialist, we should try to educate as many as people we can to make them understand the risk associated with the shadow IT. Thank you. Over to you, Vandana. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Priya. It was a wonderful session. And we actually got to know about shadow IT because it's a gray area where people don't talk about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for informing us today.
Thank
Let's
you.
give it over to Anuprita. Hi, Anuprita. So I'll tell about Anuprita. She will be talking about offensive and defensive approaches in cybersecurity. She's an Indian based out in New Jersey. We are very well connected virtually, but today was the first time wherein we actually saw each other.
Vandana.
Hi.
Thank you for the lovely introduction that you gave just now. Let me just start my video first.
Sure. I've just asked you to share the video.
Okay, so I'll just quickly share my deck and start with the introduction part.
We would say that before sharing the deck, introduce yourself.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Anuprita, and I'm currently working as an application security engineer in J2 Global, New York. I also work as an adjunct instructor in Stevens Institute of Technology. I am part of Women of Security New Jersey chapter. I'm leading that chapter currently. And I also work as a training and outreach director for Protect Us Kids Foundation. So that was about myself. Let's share the screen first. Okay. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about introduction to offensive and defensive approaches. Okay. Okay, so moving forward, before moving forward with different approaches in cybersecurity, I want to quickly talk about something that forms a baseline to these approaches and why these approaches are really necessary in cybersecurity world, and that is understanding what exactly the cyberspace is. So as we all know, cyberspace is a virtual world of computers. It is borderless, global environment where communication between a sending and a receiving entity occurs over a computer networks. Now, this communication is simply a block of data that floats around from one system to another, and every chunk of data represents an entity. This entity can be an individual or an asset or an organization. So for example, when we talk about information related to an individual, PII, that is personally identifiable information, or PHI, that is protected health information, is something that traces back correctly to an individual. This is where the hackers come into the picture, trying to gain access to PII or PHI to form that identity theft or similar attacks. And this is the reason why it is necessary to protect the identity of an individual or an organization, or we can also say to protect something that that can hide asset as well. This is why we need different approaches to protect data that belongs to an individual, an asset, or an organization. Next is the types of approaches. So in cybersecurity, there are two main approaches. First is the defensive approach, which is also known as a reactive approach. And the second one is an offensive, also known as proactive approach. Now, explaining these approaches in a simple term is that if I hit you, that's an offense. But if you try to stop me or if you try to run, that's a defense. And putting this day-to-day terminology with some complex techniques and processes forms two main approaches in cybersecurity. So we will see what these so-called techniques and approaches are and processes are as we move forward, understanding these approaches in detail. So let's take a look at the defensive approach first. So as I mentioned in my previous slide, this is also known as reactive approach, meaning that responding to an attacks after or if they ever happen in an organization. So I believe it's kind of a laid back or maybe procrastinated approach. It is also known as multi-layered or castle approach, particularly in castle approach where, hundreds and hundreds years ago when different mechanisms and weapons were used to protect the castle. In the same way, this approach uses multiple security solutions instead of relying on a singular security solution. So these multiple security solutions work in a way that if one mechanism fails, the another steps up immediately to stop an attack. So for example, these defensive mechanisms can be installing firewalls, malware scanners, intrusion detection systems together, which may have redundant functionalities instead of deploying a single security solution. Moving forward, we'll see some of the elements, or we can say functions, a company must look while adopting a defensive approach. The first and foremost is network security controls, that is installing or deploying firewall. This is also called as first or front line of defense when we talk about defensive approach. It prevents access from unauthorized networks to allow or block traffic based on defined security rules. It can also work in a parallel with intrusion protection systems to identify potential security threats and respond to them quickly. The second is antivirus solutions. This mechanism protects against the viruses and malwares, but the problem with many antivirus solutions is that it relies heavily on signature-based detection techniques, which can be exploited by intelligent hackers, as we all know. And therefore, it is always wise to use antivirus solutions that include heuristic features that scan for suspicious patterns and activities. The third is analyzing data integrity. This feature relies on file checksum mechanism. This file checksum mechanism can be used for checking the frequency of files. So the number of files have been accessed as well as its source, and to check against a known list of viruses and other malicious code. The fourth and the last one is behavioral analysis. This mechanism directly sends an alert or executes an automatic control that prevent a breach from continuing any further. But the problem with this mechanism is that to work this automation effectively, organization need to set a baseline of what a normal behavior is. And any deviation from that normal behavior is an anomaly which should be alerted. Moving forward with defensive techniques, when any organization adopt any of the security approaches, it is an organization's and the security team's responsibility to ensure that all the mechanisms are running properly and are up to date. This is obviously not a full list of techniques, but some important techniques when company try to adopt a defensive approach. First is keeping antivirus and anti-malware systems updated. Because of the current threat landscape, the new signatures are evolving every day. And that is the reason why it is always important to have those antivirus and anti-malware solutions updated with the latest signature databases. Second is patch and update systems with some regularity. This is the most important thing when developers uses different frameworks and technologies. The newer versions are always released, and it is important to patch and update this frameworks and systems. The third is installing password protection tools, then documenting a comprehensive breach response plan in order if in case the breach happens, then what are the things that should be that are needed is something that will will be told by this document. Then implementing a multi-factor authentication and spam filters. Now that we have seen all about defensive techniques, let's move forward with what an offensive approach is. So as I mentioned at the start, that offensive approach is also known as proactive approach, that is, taking all the measures before an incident hit the organization or before the situation becomes out of control. So obviously, as defensive approach, this approach is also used to protect computer systems, networks, and individuals' data from an attack. So as we saw, while adopting defensive approach, an organization has to install firewalls, then antivirus solutions, intrusion detection systems. In the same way, there are some processes that needs to be followed before adopting a proactive or an offensive approach. And the processes can be taking backup, then defining privacy and security policies and procedures, and also understanding security risks that organization carries by performing security assessments. But the real question is it just enough to beat today's sophisticated hackers and their ever-evolving hacking techniques? And the answer is no. Then what is exactly needed to protect the organization and individuals' data? And the answer is we need to switch our mindset. That is, adopting a military mindset to stop these ever-evolving attacking techniques. So instead of worrying about the vulnerabilities and documenting those never-ending remediation policies, you look for an attacker's weakness and then go after those weaknesses to shut the operation down. Moving forward. So before we go forward understanding the approaches in detail, there are some basic but important terminologies used in offensive approach, and we will go through it just quickly. The first one is vulnerability. As we all know, it's a weakness in a system that can be exploited, that later leads to an unauthorized access to a system or an asset. The second one is threat, which is a possible danger caused by exploiting a vulnerability. This threat varies on the type of businesses one can have. So, for example, for the content-based site, attacker altering the content of a website is a real threat. Also, for an e-commerce website, transaction-related frauds are the real threats. The last one is the risk. Now, it's a potential loss, damage, or destruction to an asset that is caused by exploiting a vulnerability. So, for example, the security incident happened on Equifax caused the company to go through a litigation, monetary, as well as a reputational risk. Next is the access. Now, access is something that an adversary must have to exploit or to take advantage of a weakness. Then what is payload? It's a program or a code snippet used to cause malicious action. There are a variety of destructive payloads available on a black market and on Google, capable of deleting, updating, sending spam, or or encrypting the entire database as well. Talking about effects, it can be categorized as destructive or non-destructive that weakens the CIA triad. That is, effect that cause weakening of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So for example, making a service unavailable to its intended users can said to be a destructive effect caused by a payload. Now let's move forward understanding the proactive approach. Okay, so one of the famous proactive approach is the use of 3 A's, that is annoyance, attribution, and attack. So out of these 3 A's, the first 2 A's, that is annoyance and attribution, are considered above board. Talking about annoyance, so this A focuses on frustrating the attacker by establishing false servers, ports, and services, that is, wasting an attacker's time and making them easy to detect. So for example, example of this can be installing advanced level of honeypot, honey nets, such as TrapX. Talking about attribution, the second step is something that focuses on identifying an attacker by using different tools and techniques. So for example, this can be done using a web bug, which is also known as a honey badger, that locates the source of an attack and tracking its latitude and longitude with satellite picture, and also beacons, which are placed in the documents to detect when and where data will be accessed outside the user's system. When we talk about the attack phase, the third one, the third A, this is the most controversial and illegal term when utilizing hacking back strategies. So there are various reasons for it. First reason is the GDPR law. The second reason can be if hacker is using jump servers or jump boxes for attacking companies, then tracking down these attackers can be a difficult task, and it can point to an innocent individual system. But this phase can also be used as an enhancement of the first 2 A's, that is annoyance and attribution, rather than being truly malicious. So for example, intelligence gathering done in the first 2 phases can be used to make a proper defense plan and can be used to study new evolving attacking techniques. Moving forward with offensive techniques. So these are some of the techniques a company must consider if they are planning to adopt offensive approach. The first one is to providing security awareness trainings to all the employees. That is, starting from the receptionist to the CEO of the company. Now, why these necessary trainings, why these awareness trainings are so necessary? And the answer is because human is the weakest link in security. According to the IBM research held in 2019, 51% of the breaches were malicious and criminal, but 49% of them were because of human errors and system glitches. And this is the reason why it is important to provide awareness trainings on effective cybersecurity practices, such as password management, then mobile device usage, as well as phishing awareness trainings, and so on. The second one is regularly investing in red teaming exercises or penetration testing. This technique is very helpful for the company to identify and minimize the security gaps, protecting servers as well as web applications. The third one is implementing an active intrusion prevention, data protection, and encryption techniques. The fourth one, as we discussed in the previous slides, is deploying honeypots, honey nets to lure hackers. The fifth, the last one, but not the least one, is threat detection and hunting. This technique increases protection against APTs, that is active persistent threats, and zero-day attacks. Moving forward, so now that we have seen both defensive and offensive approaches, both have their own advantages and disadvantages, but still I believe that proactive or offensive approach is something is more suitable if we think about the current threats, the current threat landscapes and sophistication in attacking techniques. In today's world, the attackers are using and utilizing automated and targeted attacks using custom exploits, taking advantage of vulnerabilities from zero-day attacks, which are impossible to detect via defensive techniques. Whereas in offensive one, cyber intelligence and real-time monitoring gives us the full overview of threat landscape by providing intelligence on yet to be published exploits and attack vectors. But that being said, there's one more approach that the companies are adopting is using defensive approach at the same time adopting offensive techniques. So you can see companies using a combination of defensive offensive techniques such as using firewalls with intrusion detection and prevention systems while performing pen tests and giving security awareness trainings to their employees at the same time. So this is something I believe is path towards adopting a full-fledged offensive approach. And with that, I also believe that we need similar kind of defensive and offensive approaches to fight against coronavirus as well. Thank you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post that on comment section or reach out to me via LinkedIn. Thank you again. Over to you, Vandana.
Thank you so much, Anuprita. That was a wonderful session. I am sure people are going to reach out to you for further questions. If you can share about your Twitter handle or LinkedIn page, I'm sure they can reach out to you.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today, Priya and Anu both. We will have you in our further sessions because we are planning for actually training sessions online. There are a lot of people reaching out for all the trainings. So we will be doing all the trainings online. It will be on the YouTube channel. So people can come and take help from that.
Yep, that would be great.
Great.